Well. Welcome to my podcast called Friendship. You must be on today because you're struggling with a friend of yours. Well, I am Aaliyah Lambert and I will be talking to you today about friendship because I am the friendship expert. Now, I'm going to be splitting this off into three parts, talking about each of the issues in a friendship world. Your first one will be talking about how to listen better to one another, but while also what comes with listening comes with communication. So I'll be discussing communication on the non-verbal side, and then lastly, our self-awareness of one another. Now, each of these three concepts are very important in a friendship, and I will be going over them. And whatever you need, I am here to explain them. So please stay tuned for episode 1, 2, and 3. Well. Welcome back to my podcast called Friendship. My name is Aaliyah Lambert, and I am your friendship expert. Now, we will be talking about listening goals. There has been a point where someone does not feel like they're being listened to, nor does another person feel like they are not being listened to. Now, I am going to be relaying 3 advice for how to listen better. The first one's going to be encouraging more intentional and empathetic listening, recognizing the importance of shared values and reliability in maintaining strong bonds, and highlighting the role of communication in navigating conflicts of misunderstandings within the friendship. Now, I'm going to start off with the encouraging more empathetic listening. We all have issues when it comes to empathetic listening. So many ways of interpreting it. I'm going to go down the road of the active listening and the non-judgmental. Now, when it comes to active listening, you're going to want to show that you're listening to them by your body language, the eye contact, the sound, like stuff like that. You want to show that you're engaged with them. And then the other point of view, or the other aspect of non-judgmental empathetic listening, is that you don't show certain facial expressions. I want to withhold that judgment of the tone or whatever it may be. Just you gotta restrain that so that way it doesn't come across as judgmental and they are more likely to open to you. I personally do have a story, and it came down to my friend. Me and her were talking and we were going to do this and this. Actually, no, this happens almost all the time when we hang out. I'm talking to her and she goes, yeah. I go, yeah, what do you mean, yeah? Would you just hear what I said? She goes, yeah, like what did I just say? And she goes, okay, I wasn't listening. I have noticed that when she says yeah to certain things in a certain tone, I go, you're not listening. And I felt that way. And there's been times I've done to her, but that's just a way I've been like, I don't want to hear your yeah. I want you to make eye contact with me. Like, oh, I totally understand that, or a certain expression, you know? The other one is the importance of shared values. It just comes down to like what's important in a relationship, and like, do you both have the same belief in the same God? And if not, that's okay, the understanding of that. And that comes down to highlighting the role of communication. So if you guys are struggling with communication, that's a different story. But that friendship aspect of like listening to me, and like you listen to one person that have them express what communication means to them and vice versa. So I just feel like you need to figure out that misunderstandings within that friendship. Now, I know that didn't cover a lot, but most of this came from my article by Vicky A. J. and then Vinatro S. in 2015 called Listening Goals and Parasocial Relationships, How Listening Styles Impact the Development of Parasocial Relationships with Media Personas. Journal of Communication Studies. Now, again, this was not enough to cover it, but it's just the basic idea of you need to figure out those 3 and listening to one another as you're communicating. Well, thank you again, and I'll see you in episode 2 and 3. Well. Welcome back to my podcast on friendship. I am Aaliyah Lambert, your friendship expert. Now, on today's episode 2, we're going to be talking about nonverbal communication. Now, some people don't know the difference between verbal communication and nonverbal. It kind of makes sense in their the verbal nonverbal, but to give you a better understanding, nonverbal communication is more of a show of like your gesture of your like body language, like if your arms cross, if you're not making eye contact. Some of the stuff I said in episode 1, but it just gets you a better understanding of like people are paying attention to your body language. Now, I'm very, very big on nonverbal communication and how that matters so much to me. Like my story about my friend, hers was more, I guess, verbal. But like I said, with the eye contact, she's not looking at me. I feel like I'm not being, her attention's not given to me. And that's just so big for me, is that nonverbal communication. And even at work, for example, I have this one coworker where she'll be on her phone and I'm talking and she's trying to like go and like responding, but I can tell she's not fully like listening to me. And so I kind of stop talking and she looks at me. I'm like, okay, so now you're paying attention. So, or even with your parents, most of us kids have issues where our mother's on her phone doing something and she goes, sure, honey. And you're like, well, were you listening to me? So those are some examples of like nonverbal communication. We have learned this throughout my whole semester in communications, actually. And it's just shown how important it is for nonverbal communication, just as much as it is for verbal. Communication is so key, but both aspects are very important in that communication. And yeah, it's just over the course of learning it, it's just how much valuable it is to me and how much I value more nonverbal communication than I do verbal. Now, if you and your friend are having some issues with your communication, I would see if it is that verbal. They're not communicating well with their words. Are they not speaking the right words, expressing their feelings or sharing ideas? Or is it more their arms are crossed and their eyes aren't looking at you and their body language isn't facing you? So it's just a matter of figuring out what's going on there and turning into that verbal communication and being like, hey, I'm feeling this way, while showing you making eye contact and whatnot. So I just feel like it's all about the bottom line and figuring out what works best for you guys in your friendship. Well, thank you for listening and hope to see you on episode 3. Well. Welcome back to episode 3 on friendship. My name is Aaliyah Lambert and I am your friendship expert. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking about self-awareness. Now, as much as it is for listening to each other and communicating to each other, it's also about that self-awareness with one another. In this research I have been using on interpersonal relationships, especially in friendships, I'm going to be talking about how self-awareness influences social interactions. Now, when it comes to friends or people around you, people you meet, you become more self-conscious or self-aware. Now, this behavior might shift depending on how they view themselves or their awareness of how they view others. Now, it comes down to understanding those dynamics and improving the quality of friendship by just being empathetic and that emotional empathy coming out. Now, self-awareness is very hard for some people to understand, or even just being, self-aware of their surroundings. Let alone how people are reacting or how they're reacting. Self-awareness is kind of hard to explain because I would say I'm more socially aware of like what's going on around me, but self-awareness is a little different. There are some tips for figuring out your self-awareness. It might be like mindful practices, while like meditation or journaling or just whatever helps you calm down. Or the other tip could be feedback from others, while asking a trusted friend or family to ask for like insights on how you perceive the world. because maybe that could be helpful, and see if they notice what you're doing. Something we've learned in this course was the Johari window, where that has 4 quadrants called the open area, the blind area, the hidden area, and the unknown area, where you have what's known to you and others, what's known to you, what others know about you, what you know about yourself, and what is unknown to both of you. Now, that is really hard to figure out for the Johari window. The Johari window is used or used in self-development, or like therapy or team building exercises. It's just a goal to like expand or understand / reduce your blind and hidden areas. But it's definitely like a step you want to take further. But it's a great way to figure out how you interpret the world. I just recommend the biggest one is asking other people. I might even try that. I have asked a few friends, but it's different unless you spend like day to day with them. So I would say, at least for me, family right now, or maybe a loved one. But it is really interesting to see how you perceive the world and how they perceive you perceiving the world. But overall, all 3 of these are very valuable. And one of the sources I got this from was by Maholo, M. Gomes, W. and D. Castro. Self-consciousness and self-awareness, associations between stable and transitory levels of evidence. This was found in the Mesa Library, and it was a very helpful piece of advice. I encourage reading it and just learning about your self-awareness. I encourage actually doing all of it, whether it's your understanding of listening to one another, communicating on the nonverbal side, and yes, the verbal side, and then lastly, your self-awareness with yourself and one another. I hope it helps. I just say, figure out what works for you, and then figure out what works for your friend that you're having issues with. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.